Hey, Luis, how are you doing?
Doing all right, Roberto. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
You're welcome.
So would you like to introduce yourself and so for those that do not know you and tell
Certainly.
what you do?
I'd be happy to. So my name is Dr. Luis Martinez. I'm the Director for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Trinity University. I've been at Trinity now leading our entrepreneurship program since 2013. So I complete my 7th year here at Trinity leading entrepreneurship. Before that, I had been an academic working as a professor of chemistry in a number of institutions, as well as a research fellow at a private institution in Florida. I've had some experience as an entrepreneur previous to that time as well. It was around 2003 or so that I launched my own business, BGV Strategies, with some friends that we then closed down due to the economic downturn in 2008 and 2009. And then prior to that, before I went and started my academic career, I also had some expertise as well working for a corporate communications and investor relation firm that specialized in the biotechnology industry following my PhD. So I've seen things from the perspective of being sort of a faculty member, being a scientist, and now in the last 7 years, being pretty deep in what's happening in our entrepreneurial ecosystem here in San Antonio and across the country.
Beautiful, thank you. Thank you, Luis. So I find it very interesting that during these times of the coronavirus, the entrepreneurs may have been the ones that they are paying a very heavy price because they may not have a safety, and then they cannot have also the support of the government, right? You comment, is this a right assumption, or there is more to it, or is just very negative? Can you?
It's complicated. The way in which we do entrepreneurship, we embrace both for-profit and non-profit entities. So I've had a number of conversations over the last 6 weeks or so with folks both in the for-profit space and in the non-profit space. In the non-profit space, it's completely devastating. There are founders of ventures that are looking to make a social impact. There are individuals that are leading organizations that all the kinds of plans that they had with regards to traditional philanthropic support, all the plans that they had with regards to the kind of social change that they wanted to have happen, have just been completely disrupted by what's happening. When you've got a huge shift that's happening in philanthropic support away from things like the arts, away from other things that aren't the basic necessities of people that they have to sort of eat and sleep and deal with the day to day, they're sort of reeling from the fact that many ways in which they sort of envisioned the future of taking place, whether it be in the arts or in the nonprofits, isn't going to be happening. Certainly at this point in 2020, and most likely for the rest of the year and possibly moving forward. Part of that has been just with the sort of mounting global recession we're going to be entering at this point. Today is April the 23rd. The new unemployment report just came out today. As of today, there's been over 26 million people who filed for unemployment in this country as of today. And so there's a huge stream of people who have immediate needs because they're no longer working, they've been furloughed, they've been laid off, they've been fired from their jobs. And so the immediate needs of food, of shelter, of being able to have money to be able to pay someone's rent or your mortgage payment is an incredible need. So we're seeing it really hit hard on the nonprofit side. On the for-profit side, it's been an interesting kind of world in that space. Some of the small businesses that we've engaged with are doing really well. This is turning out to be an incredible opportunity for them. They're in the space where perhaps they're already online, and so they conduct a lot of their work online. They're businesses that help sort of support working from home, support distance learning, support delivery service online. And so they're actually seeing a boom in their business. I had a conversation with an alum who's leading a new business in the agricultural space. And from his perspective, he says, look, our business is booming. People need to eat. Farmers need to be much more efficient. We're seeing an increase in the demand for our software, and we're going to be looking to hire in the next year to basically triple our team. And then that's bifurcated by a whole other group of entrepreneurs that are really suffering. They really sort of built their business and their model on serving customers, on everything from restaurants to any form of consumer spending. And they're having a very, very difficult time. Some of them have laid off staff. Some of them have closed their doors or considering closing their doors. And even though there's some amount of government support that's present, although there's some amount of philanthropic support, it's not enough for many of these businesses. So it's a very sort of interesting, on the for-profit side, an interesting sort of space. Some companies are doing well, or other companies have managed to pivot what they've done to embrace sort of the needs that are taking place right now. There's a flag manufacturer, for example, here in San Antonio that's completely moved from manufacturing flags to manufacturing face masks. There is a distillery here in town that we work with that's completely moved from making vodka and gin to making hand sanitizer. And so the way in which some of these businesses have pivoted into these new areas and these new immediate needs has been kind of interesting, but it's something that has to happen incredibly rapidly. And so the challenges that I see sort of in the entrepreneurship space and the nonprofit leadership space is just incredible uncertainty. They're prepared for a long slog. They're prepared that this is going to be something that will be fundamentally, you know, a once in a lifetime, a once in 100-year kind of event. And they're just trying to figure out how is it that you can sort of move forward in this kind of space. It's a devastating time. Furthermore, there's the sort of real fact that this is both a public health crisis with what's been happening with the virus. As of this recording, we still don't have a treatment, we don't have a cure, we don't have a vaccine. It's not clear how long that's going to happen. And so there's a public health aspect. There will be people who unfortunately will lose their life because of this. The chance of infection, the possibility of having a resurgence, of having a surge of this disease again is a real sort of reality. There's the actual economic output that's sort of been stymied by this entire event. There's what's been happening in the global commodities market with regards to oil. So much of what happens in Texas is dependent on oil. So much that happens in this country is dependent on fossil fuels. There really is an incredible amount of sort of disruption and just uncertainty in this space. And so that's sort of slogging through sort of people's minds. And that's just, you know, the business side, you know, and talking to folks about what's going on in their lives, in their personal lives, in balancing the needs of taking care of older family members, of taking care of younger family members, of taking care of kids, of being in a position of being now the sole brand owner, or to be in a position where your job is the one that's sort of carrying the family forward, is really carrying a tremendous amount of stress on families. People are beginning to see sort of the cracks that are present in the system. The fact that there aren't the kinds of social supports in the United States that there are in other countries is sort of really bearing bare the true sort of structural inequities, the sort of inequalities that are present in our system. For example, in some countries, to be an entrepreneur, you can rely on sort of the government healthcare system to be able to go ahead and take care of your healthcare needs. So for businesses, it's actually an incredible environment. That's a cost that you don't have to bear as an entrepreneur. That's something as an entrepreneur you don't have to worry about. The Finnish, the Swedish sort of system is there to sort of support you. There isn't that sort of fact that's present here. And so these are the kinds of stresses that are taking place in people's lives right now. We're 6 weeks, a month in. People have managed to sort of trudge through with sort of what this sort of normal looks like. People have been dealing with sort of the immediate needs of getting past tomorrow, getting past this week. Now sort of the longer term prospects are beginning to sort of settle in. And although while there's a tremendous amount of sort of worry, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty that's happening moving forward. What's interesting about the sort of folks that I work with is that they're resilient, they're resourceful, they are planning on doing the best that they can. They've been through tough times before. Talking to some entrepreneurs that've been through the aftermath of 2007 and 2008, having gone through the experience of firing, of closing their business, of furloughing employees, I can see how many of them are now shaping the kind of leadership that they're doing for their own organizations based upon that experience. Many of them have committed not to sort of repeat the mistakes that they made 12 years ago again. Many of them are taking the lessons that they learned at that time to sort of really sort of strengthen the positions that they're in right now. So it's an interesting sort of moment in time.
So you said the nonprofit is devastated, while in the profit world there are two realities:
Yeah.
a reality that is booming, a reality that is in trouble.
Well, and in the nonprofit space too, when we look at the demand at sort of nonprofits like the San Antonio Food Bank or Haven for Hope, they're under tremendous amount of pressure because of the kind of demands that they're seeing have been unmatched. Like they've never seen this kind of level of demand at any point. And so we're also seeing the kind of the two worlds in the nonprofit space as well. But what's interesting is that like in the nonprofit space, everyone is feeling pain. Even those nonprofits that are incredibly well managed, that have great sort of models to be able to sustain their kind of mission, because of the incredible demand for services that's happening place right now with the San Antonio Food Bank for housing. They're just sort of straining under the demand and sort of the crushing need that people have. So even in nonprofits, it's sort of a tale of two worlds. There's some nonprofits that are getting more resources to be able to sort of support their mission, but at the same time, the demand is just outstripping that ability to sort of serve. So while we're having nonprofits, for example, in the art space, Luminaria was canceled this last week as of this recording, in part because of sort of what's happening on the public health side, in part because of sort of the need of sort of finances and having things happen. We're also seeing trouble happening there as well, but it's sort of binodal there as well, just as it is in the for-profit space.
So, but this company and both businesses, both in the non-profit realm and the profit realm, are booming or are not feeling the heat because they are responding to the need that of the moment, right?
Correct.
But
Correct.
that guarantee longevity in the long run.
Correct. Or it's not clear, or longevity for the long term isn't clear, right? They're so focused on serving this immediate need right now. I've got 50 more people walking in my door a day than I used to have. There's 10,000 more people that are now asking for help that I'm not prepared to serve. It's that sort of like immediate sort of crisis mode that many of these organizations are still sort of working through, the sort of long-term planning of, you know, what does June look like? You know, what does September look like? Much less a year from now. Many organizations are struggling to figure out what that means because of the immediacy of the sort of demand right now.
So the organizations doing best are the ones that are fulfilling the need of the moment. Is that one of the keys to, let's say, success or survival?
It's one of them. One of them are those that are serving the need of the moment. The others that I'm seeing really clearly, and this is at every level, is the importance of incredible, good, strong leadership. Those organizations that under good times could have had not so great leaders, those organizations that could have managed with dysfunctional leadership or dysfunctional boards, are finding this moment, the kind of pressure and the kind of stress of this moment, are really laying bare the stark differences between sort of strong leadership and not strong leadership. And what I mean by strong leadership is not sort of authoritarian, sort of my way or the byway kind of leadership. I mean leadership that understands the importance of sort of that organization and their mission, that's taking the steps to ensure that their people, their staff, their employees, their customers are being served, that leaders are serving by example in the ways that they do things. One thing that's pretty stark that I see in sort of the landscape is the number of executives for a wide range of organizations who are taking pay cuts, who are not getting paid, who are working front lines with frontline workers, who understand that the kind of sacrifices that their staff are required to do, they're required to do those same steps as well. So leadership is a critical component that's present as well. The third is management, which is different than leadership. The ability for some of these organizations to be well managed during good times, which allowed for reserves, which allowed for good planning, which allowed for strong communications. Those organizations are doing fairly well. They're being incredibly transparent in how they're communicating to their stakeholders. They're being incredibly transparent in how they're sort of communicating to the public. They're being on the front end of acknowledging sort of the realities that people are dealing with, and are taking the steps to ensure that that's taking place. So those are three of sort of the things that I see: sort of leadership, management, as well as sort of serving the need. That's really distinguishing sort of organizations that are going to go ahead and be able to meet this challenge today and still be around in the future, and those that may not make it at this point in 2021.
So you were one of the first ones that mentioned, talking to me, this idea of the new normal.
Yeah.
It was more than a month ago. Can you elaborate on that, what that means? That what is this new normal? Because one of the things that you just said is that what is 1 month from now is going to look like, and the future.
Right.
And from the interview, this idea that the future does not exist anymore in this moment, and then we are day by day. So what is that new normal that you were talking about?
There's a lot of factors. And now that we're sort of a month in, some of the sort of gut feelings I had a month ago, 6 weeks ago, are turning out to sort of bearing out to be true. One of the factors of this new normal is just incredible anxiety and fear. There's incredible anxiety because of the economic situation that I sort of talked about previously, about sort of the fear of illness, of being potentially ill, or family members that are ill, the constant anxiety. If you're not worrying about yourself, you're worrying about people in your immediate family, you're worried about your loved ones. That's a very real thing that's present now. And it's all evasive. This is not just economic anxiety. This is not just anxiety about your relationships with you and your partner, you and your spouse, you and your children, the future of your children. It's just sort of an all-encompassing anxiety about this moment. And I don't know what it will take for all of us to sort of get that out of our system. That's going to be here for quite a long time. And just as sort of many of us sort of remember that generation that lived through the Great Depression, and the kinds of nuances, my father was of that generation, of sort of the nuances of sort of that generation. One of the things I think that will earmark this generation is sort of this aspect of this anxiety that we have. Another aspect to this sort of new normal is the acceptance of this way in which we're communicating. The ability for us to communicate via distance, whether through this media like Zoom or FaceTime or video conferencing. We've sort of went over that hump of the sort of adaptability and adoption of these kinds of modalities of communicating. And so in many ways, we're no longer local. Our ability to communicate in this way, whether it be someone down the street or down from the other side of town or on the other side of the world, is sort of normal. And so in many ways, we're even more connected than we were before, with this ability to sort of telecommute, this ability to sort of communicate, and now collaborate and work effectively via this medium. I'm excited about that. I think in many ways, our world has grown smaller because of this event, and our ability to communicate and connect with each other through this kind of medium is something that's coming out. But another thing also is just how important what's happening locally is. So the call for people to support local businesses, in part because of what I talked about previously with what's happening, the need to support local restaurants, the need to be able to buy your eggs and milk locally, to be able to know where your cheese is coming from, to be able to get a sense about where local flour is, to support not only those local businesses, but to serve your needs. We're seeing sort of a rise of how important it is for us to be focused on serving our immediate locality, our community, our village, our city, our town, in many ways our state. It's another aspect of this new normal. What's also sort of coming sort of pretty stark with regards to this new normal is the feelings that people had, or the knowledge that people had about both structural inequality, of sort of institutional racism, of privilege. This entire event has sort of just blown and exposed in a very clear way. The sort of differences between those individuals that can commute from home, can work from home, that will still have paychecks, that can sort of be able to be part of that knowledge economy, and not leave their home for 6 weeks, versus those that have to leave their home every day in order to do the work that they need to do to put food on their table, or to serve those that are most impacted by what's happening. The workers every day that are going out and filling deliveries at grocery stores, the gig workers that are out there that are serving food, the frontline healthcare workers that are working in hospitals in places like New York, or serving places in Washington. We're seeing this sort of huge starkness of privilege worldwide. We're seeing how the sort of impact of the knowledge economy have sort of really left entire communities dependent on old ways and old styles of knowledge, and how other communities have sort of moved forward to be able to easily just pivot. I work in an office, I work remotely already, dealing with folks around the world, whether I'm in my office in a building downtown or I'm in my office at home, I can effectively do that. And so this moment is also bringing sort of the stark reality of these kinds of things, much in addition to sort of those that are sort of falling through the safety net, the fact that many people are living paycheck to paycheck. We see the lines in the news, the national news, of the thousands of people who've gone to the San Antonio Food Bank, and that incredible sort of desperate need that we have. Those people are not the office workers. They're the people who are working in the tourism industry that got completely shut down here in San Antonio. The hotels, the restaurants, the stark sort of reality of, we sort of live in a country of sort of blue collar, white collar, or knowledge, economy versus non-knowledge economy, is incredibly stark, and it really is sort of part of this new normal. Another aspect I think that's kind of interesting, that I didn't predict, but it's been something that's been part of this new normal. People are really connecting with each other in ways that prior to this crisis they hadn't been. Whether it's, the family that you've been spending a majority of your time with because you're in quarantine or you're at stay-at-home orders, and so it's your spouse that you're there with 24/7, it's your kids with you that you're there 24/7, extended family members, people that are checking in on older parents, or checking in on older aunts and uncles, grandparents. We're seeing a level of connecting with each other in ways that was sort of lost in previous times. There's a hunger to see people. There's a hunger to embrace people. That's sort of part of this new normal. Another thing that I think is important about this time, especially for those of us who have known friends or family that have had tremendous losses of family members or friends during this time, is that there's no effective way of mourning during these kinds of ways, or celebrating in these kinds of times. The ways in which we would sort of mark new beginnings and celebrations with parties and gatherings, or the way in which we would mourn a loss and mark sort of the loss of a member of a family. There is no moment for that in this kind of time. And so while we try as best as we can through, Zoom recollections and videos, it's not the same of being present with family members and to embrace each other and to remember the passing of a loved one, or to mark a celebration of a great accomplishment. I think about the entire generation of college and high school students who this year aren't going to have that traditional graduation, that aren't going to go through those kinds of markings of going from one point to another point, and how this is reflected with people who who intended to get married, people who intended to sort of mark birthdays. It's a different kind of way in which people are trying to feel their way through about what that means. We're inherently social beings. We thrive on seeing each other and seeing facial expressions and feeling each other's warmth and embracing each other. It's hard to do that in this kind of new normal. And so I think in many ways, it's funny, like, you know, Fiestas, this is supposed to be Fiesta in San Antonio this week, and Fiesta's been postponed to November, and people are saying like, oh, the incredible party we're going to have as we embrace each other, right? I think there's going to be a recommitment to the sort of that kind of level of reconnecting with folks, and I hope that many of the ways in which people have bridged sort of communications and have reached out, that they maintain past this time, that I think are going to be important as well. Those are some of the things that I see. I also see an appreciation for those individuals that make all of our lives a lot more bearable and a lot easier. I've got young kids that are in school, and the kinds of homeschooling challenges that we have and working with our kids Monday through Thursday, and the great work that I see local teachers trying to do under these circumstances, the incredible work that food service workers have in restaurants and daycare. And I mean, there's an incredible sort of appreciation, I think, for those of us that are privileged to have our kids in school with incredible teachers, to really appreciate the incredible work that they're doing under this time to do their best to serve our kids. And that so much of their work that we see in the normal time, the time before, right? The before times that were sort of hidden are being sort of exposed now. Just the ways in which they work with kids, the way in which they're working with our kids are really clear. I'm seeing crises as well, where because of this time, folks that needed to reach out with other kinds of professionals, whether they be in mental health or whether it be in physical health, because of the kind of constraints that are taking place, real needs and real stress is happening there as well as appreciation for the work that people do in that kind of space. So, you know, what that means when we look 6 months from now, or a year from now, will be very interesting. What I do know as a scientist is the following. There will be effective treatments in the next 6 to 9 months. There will be ways in which we'll be able to sort of, you know, treat people who are infected with COVID-19. Within 18 months to 2 years, we'll have vaccines. People will be vaccinated, they'll be inoculated. But there's going to be a whole lot of continuing pain during that time period between now and then. And so, you know, when we look back at this moment, it'll be interesting to see sort of what we keep and what we conserve, and how it fundamentally changes us. What is really clear is that what was before is now in the past, and that we're looking at something really new. And it's interesting, like when you this is an election year here in the United States, when you look at the kind of political discourse or lack of political discourse, you see the desire to sort of like inject previous forms of them versus us, or a fear within sort of a new reality. And it seems in many ways hollow, because it fails to recognize the reality of what's happening today and how those kinds of things have changed. So those are just some of the things I think that mark the sort of new reality, the new normal.
Well, there are very interesting points that in this new normal. So it seems that the analysis of what is happening, of what life is now, and an acceptance of what is happening now can lead us toward the future.
Sure.
We can plan in the future. So because this idea that we don't know what's happening 1 month from now, and 2 months from now, it's real. At least we feel it real in this moment. But recognizing that we are in this new normal that you talk about, and recognizing some of the aspects that are very concrete, you know, the fear, the acceptance of communication, long distance communication, that breaks down the boundaries because there are no more confines when we are on. But then at the same time, going back into your local community and supporting your local community. And then this, I'm just going through the points you enumerated here. The fact that this event really showed us, lay bare really all the inequalities that exist in our system.
Yeah.
So we really see what that happens, right? And that that people in real life are connecting in different ways, in more real ways, or they are trying to find new ways. Could all these points that you mentioned, and could an objective and also optimistic analysis, because you gave us something that is a little bit more optimistic, right? Of what is happening now could lay the foundation of what we can create tomorrow.
Right.
Isn't that what an entrepreneur would do? Looking at the needs of the moment, analyzing it objectively, and then creating the need.
Well, I think that, you know, an entrepreneur is inherently a problem solver. You know, what an entrepreneur intends to do is solve a problem for somebody. And in hopefully doing so, creating real value and solving that problem for somebody, and then being able to capture that value to be able to sustain the ability to create that value in the future. So yeah, I agree. I think that sort of an entrepreneurial optimistic perspective is like, where are the opportunities for problems to be solved here? Both large problems, really large problems that I sort of alluded to, the sort of structural issues that are taking place, as well as really sort of small, finite problems. You know, with a sort of aspect in how people are communicating via Zoom, the ability for sort of Zoom backgrounds and design for Zoom backgrounds is becoming to be a demand job at this point. And so I think that there's a moment for optimism, especially for those of us that are sort of inspired to sort of start something from nothing, for those of us that are inspired to do some aspect of change, to be able to see what the future will be like.
So this is going to be our last question. Do you need to talk to someone there?
Yeah, can you hold on just 1 second?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. No, no, I got 5 minutes of your time, and actually,
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
I forgot. So, what was my question? Oh, actually, my question is this: a final question, and I know we talked.
Give me the second to the final question. I think I flubbed that last question up, by the way.
we touched a little bit on that. So you and I have been involved in teaching arts entrepreneurship mindset, and we know that the mindset is very important, right, for the artist as well as for the entrepreneur, and the artist can learn from the entrepreneurs and vice versa. Now, from what I understand, and from what you have taught me, the entrepreneur is looking at a need and within a niche, and creates value.
Yeah.
And often that value is a very concrete entity, right?
Yeah.
This is the masks
Right.
that needed within this niche that is San Antonio, that is the wall. right? So it has been always my understanding that entrepreneurs were dealing with very concrete problems and that were finding solutions that can be monetized and create some return to the investment, right?
Either return for the investment or the ability to sustain that value creation that we see, for example, with nonprofits or more traditional small businesses where you're not worried about any investors. You just want to be able to make sure that you continue to live the life that you want to do, making these kinds of changes or creating and solving these kinds of problems for the rest of your sort of working life.
So now it seems to me that there is a need that is a need of the community, and a need of the country, a need of the world that is above the concrete need. There is a need for a new social structure, right? There is a need for a new politics. Let's not call it politics because it's not anymore a political problem. It's about creating a new idea of what politics are about. And the creation of these new leaders, right? This is of course, it's a problem that started with even before the Greeks, and it's part of our culture. But as we are creating this new normal, don't you think that we should also look at the artists, entrepreneurs, because for me they are the same, for us they are the same, as also not creating creating a new social structure, creating a new political structure? Or is this too crazy or aversive or too, I can't find the word. Of course, for some people, this seems to be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, the system has failed us. We need to create a new system. And we have to get rid of the system that has failed us. At least that's my opinion, and create a new one.
So, as someone who studies innovation, disruption destroys things that existed before and lead to new things and new innovations. And so, very rightly, these larger kind of constructs, right? A new politics, a new way of communicating, an aspect of in just 1 second, I've got to do with a cat outside. Just one second. Sorry for the delay. All right, take two.
That's the new normal, right?
That's the new normal.
Your life, your private life is part of your public life in this moment, right? You have something, being everything compacted together is something not even to have to apologize. That's true. That's what it is.
We were saving this for posterity. So big disruptions like this lead to new institutions, lead to new organizations, lead to new ways of thinking. And so I think there is an opportunity for us to really sort of think creatively about what new systems should be in place that this disruption makes the case for, right? Or that places places the tools to be able to sort of begin to build. Just a couple of sort of critical examples. We need to figure out how to take care of people who are sick. We've got folks that are coming through this with insurance, without insurance. We've got folks that are coming through this that are going into emergency rooms. How is it that all gets paid for? How is it that we as a society value members of our society who are ill? There's one stark sort of model that we've heard over the last 4 weeks, which is, you know, they've had underlying health conditions, and well, they were going to die anyway, and so for the betterment of the economy, you know, we're okay if we have tens of thousands of people die. At least it's not millions. And even if it is millions, it's worth it for the economy. The cheapening of human life, and that this is sort of underlying that expression, and whether it was made as a serious comment, or whether it was made as some sort of flippant, sort of a way to score political points, sort of shows that we have a problem about how it is that we deal with people who are sick. How is it we deal with people who are ill? That what is the value of a human life? And these are, you know, these are questions that we've been dealing with since, as you mentioned, since before the Greeks, right? Right. I mean, this is sort of the hallmark of the humanities. This is a conversation that artists and philosophers have had for millennia, and yet the importance of that conversation and the importance of that value still is present. And so we have the opportunity for us to take a deep look at who we are as individuals, who we are as a society, who we are as organizations, and ask ourselves, in that one example, how is it that we do value human life? How is it that we do value people that are sick? I think that, you know, just for a real sort of banal kind of example, there used to be in before times the sort of heroic, come on in and work when you're sick, right? Like, oh, I've got the sniffles, I've got the flu, but I will bear through it. You know, it's important for the work, it's important for a job, it's important for the team, for me to sort of play through my illness, for me to sort of work through my illness. You can't do that when we've got something like a coronavirus, because when you're ill, you're clearly infecting people around you. But there's also the possibility before you actually had symptoms of being ill that you were infecting other people that you were with. So a very simple change, right? Let's allow people to be sick. Let's allow people to go home and be sick. Let's allow people to have sick leave. Let's allow people, you know, these very small critical changes that can happen, that can balloon to be larger forms of social change, are just ways in which we can think about the world that we see today at this moment, and what it was in the before times, and how many of these larger questions that you mentioned are for a call for action and for change as well. Many entrepreneurs and many leaders get hyper-focused in the sort of more pragmatic problem solving, right? People need vodka, so I'll make vodka, right? Oh, people don't need vodka anymore. I'm going to go ahead and make hand sanitizer. Awesome. Oh, people don't need hand sanitizer anymore. Well, we'll just make more vodka again, right? Like that. I mean, great business, great entrepreneurs, but there's other levels of problem solving that I think call as a challenge for people, entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs who are interested in making social change. It calls the opportunity for artists to be able to sort of point to the real kind of discourses that people need to have. It calls to mind for young people about the kind of future that they wish to inherit. For those of us that are not as young as my children, to be able to see what kind of future that we want our children to inherit. These are important questions that I think we need to undertake, because here's what we know is a fact. The way the world was March 1st, 2020, the way the world was February 1st, 2020, is not the way the world is going to be March 1st, 2025, or February 1st, 2025. Something fundamentally big has happened worldwide. In global ways, we probably will see a greater strengthening of what's happening in the Far East with China's manufacturing, with sort of the way in which global supply chains are sort of based out of global Chinese manufacturing. In many ways, the current crisis has strengthened that. In other ways, it's shown the demand for more local manufacturing in Europe and in the United States, for the need to have, you know, redundancies in place in case global things like this happen. But these are just sort of easy things to predict. How it is that we will interact as a society, how it is that we will interact with each other, you know, this is a generational change that is going to be as big, if not bigger, than what my father experienced through the Great Depression and World War II.
Okay. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I am really concerned about in this moment is exactly what's happening in Hungary, where they gave power to Orban, that is now a dictator. Or a note from a friend of mine who is a policeman in Rome, writing to me and saying, wow, it's very incredible how easy it is for, how willing people are to give up some of their freedom to be safer. And he notices it as a policeman, right? Someone that is there and provides the security, and someone that is asking, wow, this is dangerous. So I'm concerned about that, because I remember I was here in 9/11, and I remember that we did give up some of our freedom.
Yeah.
After 9/11, and now after this COVID-19, I worry that we are going to be willing to give up a little bit more freedom.
Okay.
And that's also one of the direction in which this world, this nation can go to. I was talking to a friend of mine from India, and actually he shared with me some of the material that he has seen that is going to be shared in the drive that you are also will be part of, and how people are killing people just because they have the virus, or because they have the virus and they are Muslims, or they have the virus and they are Chinese. This is sad, and this is happening. And I think that for us to be vigilant and not going back to the old normal, where we seems that this old politics wants to bring us to, is very dangerous.
Yeah.
And I don't want, and this, of course, this what I'm saying will be labeled as subversive. But it is not subversive. It's really the reality. We may risk to lose a little bit of our freedom, not a little bit, but much of our freedom. So I am concerned about that. That's why, for me, the call to the artists and the call to the entrepreneurs, to the call to working together and find ways to at least to avoid that in this new normal, and guide toward the rebuild of something that is not us being deprived of our freedom, but us creating a life that has at its core the humanity and the planet. And I think that not everybody is listening to that. So we need to be vigilant. So it's something that worries me a little bit. My friend, thank you very much for the time.
Oh, Roberto, thank you so much for the time. I think it's important in this moment. I mean, I'm sort of sitting outside right now. You can hear the wind chimes, and the sky is clear, and it's springtime. I think it's important for people to understand that we can have a better tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to understand that the way in which we got into this mess does not necessarily mean we have to stay in this mess. I'm on one level an incredible pragmatist, but I'm also an optimist. I see, especially when I talk to young men and women, our students, our prospective students, my own children in high school and elementary school, there is a desire for something better. And I think there can be. I think there can be. I think that the ability for us to live in a world that perhaps has less fear, that embraces the challenges of this moment, that looks at this moment and looks at sort of the best of humanity that came out of this, the ways in which people responded that really are the best of who we are as a species, and have called out the worst of who we are, is going to be incredibly important, because we can't forget. We can't forget that we are better than this. We can't forget that we can do something that can be change, that can change what exists. I'm an optimist in that sort of way. And so I've got great hope that the students that are involved in this project, the students that we have the privilege of working with through the course of our careers, will take this moment and say, stop, not that, more that. Stop. We should double down on this and make this better and more and life-giving. And this clearly shows that this is not a good thing we need to do anymore. Perhaps we need to sort of put the brakes on that, or that should not exist anymore. I've got great hope.
So let's help the students, this new generation, right?
Yeah.
We are kind of responsible of the mess, well, a lot of it.
We are.
We're lucky that we actually get to work together.
Yeah. Thank you so much, my friend. I look forward our weekly calls.
Yeah, I love this. Thank you. It's much to think about.
You give me a lot to think about as well.
With everybody, and I will share the drive with you so that you can see also that conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, and I'll talk to you next Thursday.
I'll talk to you next Thursday. Thanks so much.
Hello, friend.